Welcome to today's explainer. So, we all love to travel, right? But have you ever actually stopped to think about what your mere presence does to the places you visit? Today, we're taking some absolutely fascinating academic insights and turning them into a mirror that reflects exactly how our simple leisurely vacations secretly turn us into active agents of profound cultural change. Let's dive in.
So I want you to ask yourself, are you just a traveler or are you an agent of cultural change? Think back and reevaluate your very last trip. When we leave home, we usually think we're just escaping the daily grind. Maybe snapping a few photos, kicking back, buying a souvenir or two. But we are actually setting the stage for a journey into hidden socioeconomic ripples. It's wild, but every single footstep you take in a foreign land initiates this massive cultural give and take. And that exchange fundamentally alters the local community, their economy, and even their natural environment.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start where anthropology meets tourism, trace the history of the field, and then map out the tourist journey. After that, we'll look at the types of encounters, and finally unpack the host versus guest dynamic.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, Anthropology meets Tourism, the academic baseline.
For the longest time, anthropologists spent their days studying ancient ruins, isolated tribes, and really complex, distant societal rituals. But eventually, they had this light bulb moment where they realized that modern tourists are just as fascinating to study. Back in 1989, a scholar named James Lett defined tourism as the single largest peaceful movement of people across cultural boundaries in the history of the world. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Tourism isn't just about taking a break from work. It is a massive, continuous sociological phenomenon. It's a literal collision where short-term guests, who are often coming from highly developed regions, interact with long-term host cultures. We are talking about global mobility on a completely unprecedented scale, where the traveler is this undeniable, powerful agent of change.
Moving right along to Section 2, History of the Field, Tracing the Academic Journey.
So how exactly did we get here? How did the academic world finally wake up and realize the sheer power of the tourist? Well, back in the 1960s, there was actually a huge reluctance among anthropologists to study tourists. And the reason why is pretty funny. Traveling to an exotic location just to observe the locals felt, well, a little too close to what anthropologists themselves did. It was just a bit too close for comfort. But as global travel absolutely exploded in the 1970s, that mindset simply had to shift. The real game changer came in 1977. That's when anthropologist Valine Smith published a groundbreaking book called Hosts and Guests. That one piece of work essentially opened the floodgates, paving the way for our modern era of treating globalized mass travel as a highly serious and vital academic discipline.
All right, on to Section 3, the tourist journey, a modern rite of passage.
Now that we know the history, let's unpack the psychology. What actually drives us to pack our bags and leave our comfort zones? We can look at this through Victor Turner's famous theory of transition, which breaks down into 3 distinct stages. First up is separation. This is where we leave our ordinary lives, our jobs, and our boring daily routines behind. Second is liminality. It's a Latin term for crossing the threshold, and this is the vacation itself. It's a designated, special time where we experience the extraordinary, step completely out of our normal societal roles, and just share this unique togetherness with fellow travelers. And finally, reincorporation, returning home, psychologically refreshed and fundamentally transformed by the trip. What's crazy here is that anthropologists realized a modern secular vacation perfectly mirrors the psychological stages of an ancient religious pilgrimage.
Which brings us to Section 4, Types of Encounters, Heritage, Nature, and Pilgrimage.
Having understood exactly why we leave home, let's explore the destination itself. Once we arrive, there are 3 major ways we usually encounter that transformative, liminal state. The first is through religious pilgrimage. Think of traveling to Mecca or the Kumbh Mela, where millions of people engage in a shared period of asceticism and self-purification. The second is cultural heritage. This is visiting the Taj Mahal or wandering through vibrant historical festivals, where we're really looking for a tangible link to our past to enrich our lives. And the third is eco and nature tourism. This one is absolutely crucial today. It involves forming real partnerships with indigenous communities to sustain the environment. It ensures that tourism brings in the necessary economic benefits without completely trashing the local wildlife or ecology in the process. All of this underlying motivation is brilliantly captured by Dean McCannell. In 1976, he wrote, "Tourism is a ritual performed to the differentiations of modern complex society." Okay, that sounds like an academic mouthful, but what he's really getting at is that even entirely secular trips like exploring a heritage monument Wandering through an art museum or hiking through a rainforest, they act as vital, almost sacred rituals for us. For folks living in highly structured, fast-paced modern societies, tourism provides that necessary, revitalizing break from the ordinary. We desperately need it just to maintain our physical and mental well-being.
Finally, let's dive into Section 5, Host versus Guest, Cultural Commodification. So we land on the aftermath of the journey. There is this profound socioeconomic friction that happens when all these eager guests suddenly arrive in a host community. And it exposes the core dilemma of the entire tourism industry. On one side, we have the guest. They're seeking leisure, a taste of authenticity, and a temporary, carefree escape. But on the flip side, we have the host. This is a local community navigating a really deep economic reliance on those visitors. They're dealing with massive environmental impacts like staggering amounts of plastic waste or severe water overuse. And they face daily commodification. The tourist's innocent quest for an authentic escape often ends up forcing the local community to literally package and sell their own daily lives, their homes, and their ancient traditions just to survive economically. Let's look at what that commodification of culture actually looks like in the real world. Take the sacred prayers at the Nizamuddin Dargah, a famous Sufi shrine in Delhi. When tourists and pilgrims walk into the narrow lanes leading up to the shrine, they are immediately hit by vendors selling these ready-to-go cane trays filled with rose petals, incense, and wish threads. So a deeply sacred, traditionally optional ritual is actively packaged and sold as this mandatory, consumable tourist product. And we see the exact same thing happening up in the Himalayas. Traditional Tibetan and Bon monastery layouts are being subtly altered, not for any spiritual reason, but simply to accommodate the traffic flow and the gaze of foreign visitors. Piece by piece, culture literally becomes a commodity.
So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. The next time you pack your bags, will you just leave footprints, or will you change a culture forever? The absolute biggest takeaway here is that every single time you travel, you are not just a passive fly on the wall looking through a camera lens. You are an active participant in a massive global cultural exchange, and it carries very real economic and social consequences. Keep that in the back of your mind on your next adventure. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.